There's obviously risk with buying the lot. And in the back of my mind, I always told myself, like, if there's no approvals on this lot and it can be built, worst case scenario, I could always flip this with approvals. We'll probably have to put a certain amount of money into it to get there. But at that point, the lot's going to be worth way more than when we bought it. Welcome back to Midweek Modern Craftsman. I have 3 things on my agenda today. 2 are work related. 1 is personal related. So the work related one, I had my buddy Nielsen Christ, who was asking me about our property that we are developing, some questions on that as far as how we got through approvals, what that process looked like buying land versus buying a house. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit. It'll be surface level. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that because it was an extensive process, but I'll kind of help guide you through what that looked like, or at least what our experience was like. The other thing, a quick trip that I have to Arizona tomorrow, I want to discuss briefly with you. And I'm going to start off this podcast with talking a little bit about a race that I had yesterday. So we were in Lancaster on Friday and Saturday, and then I was supposed to come home Saturday night because the first Enduro race for the East Coast Enduro Association is on Sunday, and I had a couple of buddies who asked me to sign up, which I'll be honest, first race of the year, typically cold. It could be snowy, it could be rainy, it could be wet, and then everyone comes out to race this, me included. I don't race the whole series. I'll do a couple of a handful of races here and there, but I had some buddies ask me to race. So I said yes, and I was in Lancaster on a Saturday night, and some things happened with the family, and obviously picking my stuff up, leaving them to go race. I was uncertain of what was going to happen, but I ended up going to the race, and there was a lot of people. There was a lot of fast people. This race typically has not... I haven't done well at it, whether it's nerves, whether it's cold, the first race of the year. There always seems to be issues. I burned checks. Last year, I broke my shifter in the second test of the day and then toasted my clutch because I was trying to ride in second and third gear, just clicking my bike into gear with a wrench and then trying to stay in that gear. And I was either overloading the bike and the engine or overloading the clutch, depending on what gear I was in. So I haven't done well. And I ended up going to the race and I took 23rd out of, I think, 432 people. So I'm super happy with that. I am very sore today. I knew I was riding hard. I had a couple of dumb little mistakes, a couple of tip overs, just getting a little bit tired and lazy later in the day. But all in all, like, I couldn't, at 39 and with the experience I have, I couldn't have asked really to do much better than I did. The guys who won my class, both previous AA racers. So I'm racing A vet, which is A rider, 30 to 39 years old. So I'm in the last year that I can race vet class. Then I'll go up to A senior, which typically gets a little easier the older you get. But the A vet class is friggin' stacked. There's just a bunch of AA guys who don't race all the time and come back, and they're my age and they slide into the A class. But 23rd overall, considering how many fast guys are out there. I think there's 2 AA guys behind me, 2 directly in front of me with the results. So I'm super happy with that. But I am so sore and just like tired and exhausted. I guess, just having so much adrenaline going and then racing. And we were on we didn't get a great row pick. So we were on row 70. So around 300 people had raced the course before us. So it was winding up getting a little bit hammered. But yeah, overall good day. I had a ton of fun. No timekeeping mistakes. Checked in when I should have. I don't know if I could have pushed more than I did, like safely and comfortably. I felt like I wasn't riding over my head, but I was cooking. So super pumped with those results. It was a fun day. The weather wound up being amazing. It was like 50 degrees by the end of the race. Sunny, really for March in South Jersey. That's about as good as it can be. I think it was over 40 the time that the race started. So normally it's like in the 20s and you're freezing, and you warm up by the end of the day, and then the ground starts to thaw out and get super muddy. So it was somewhat of a best case scenario, all things considered. But really happy with that. I initially was, like I said, there's some personal things that were going on within the family, and I wasn't going to leave to go race. And then my kids and my wife were like, you have to go do this. This is something that's important to you. And my kids were like, Dad, if you don't go, you're not going to understand your true potential. Tilly was like, if you don't go, you automatically lose. So I'm probably quoting her more eloquently than she said, but essentially she was telling me, like, you have to step up to the plate. You have to go do this. And if you don't, you're always going to question what could have been. So I'm glad that they stood behind me. They supported me. And I think it's really important with everything that's going on with the family and life that I ended up doing this. And I'm glad that I went and did it. And I was feeling very guilty about it. But I had the support of my family, my kids, my wife, and I even came home to them like with a little celebratory sign for me hanging in the kitchen. So it was super pumped. I had a great day. It was fun. The trail was amazing. The Tri-County did a great job laying out trail. There was a ton of new stuff. It held up well, even on row 70. I mean, there was some hammered stuff, but it was my favorite race that they've put on that I've ever done. So super pumped with that. Very, very excited and pleased with how I did. All right, so that's enough of the personal stuff. So if anyone listens to this and then that there's somebody else who doesn't want to listen to that, tell them fast forward 6 minutes and you'll be through me standing on my soapbox telling you how I did in my race that I'm super pumped about. Next up, I'm heading out tomorrow. We are heading out. I'm going to meet Nick and Doug and Paul. We're going to Goodyear, Arizona. So we're flying into Phoenix tomorrow morning. I think my flight's around 11:30. 10:30. I don't know. Sometime around there. We're flying into Goodyear. We're grabbing dinner with the Anderson team, Brooke over there. And then the following day, we're getting up early and we're doing a tour of their plant in Goodyear where they manufacture a bunch of the 100 series windows. So we're going to be creating a long format video for them and then a few shorter, like reel type content based on their manufacturing facility that they produce a lot of their 100 series windows out there. So similar to what we did in Minnesota at their main headquarters and their main plant, we're going to be out in Arizona for the day documenting how they manufacture those windows, a lot of the engineering behind them. So I'm excited for that. We're going to be flying in tomorrow, getting there, having dinner, sleeping, waking up, meeting downstairs at like 6:30 a.m., shooting for the day. And then I'm getting back on a plane at 11 o'clock at night and taking the red eye back to New Jersey. And then from there, I believe that's Thursday at this point. So I have Thursday and Friday to get some stuff done. And then Saturday, Rachel leaves for Vietnam for another week-long trip. And my club's Enduro that we host, the kids race is Saturday. And then the adults race is on Sunday. So we have a lot going on this week. We were just, like I said, in Lancaster for this tournament. I had this race down in Millville. So it's a chaotic week. Volleyball, softball, practice, all that crap. We're juggling a lot right now. I'm sure that everyone is, but if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like there's not enough hours in the day, I'm right there with you. You are not alone. Keep pushing through it. Find some stuff in your life that motivates you to keep your head up, that keeps you engaged, that keeps you happy. I'm very excited for baseball season to be starting up. It's just as silly as it sounds. When I was 23 and I stopped drinking, I needed just something daily to look forward to just say, hey, I have this going on tonight, right? Like I have something to look forward to, whether it's a trip somewhere, whether I'm going to ride my dirt bike, whether like for me at 23, it wound up being the Phillies. So I'm super excited for the Philly season to start. It just gives me that one little thing in my life where it's like, hey, I'm going to wrap up work today and there's going to be a Phillies game on that I can listen to. And that's almost every day with baseball. And it's something that I've always enjoyed since I was younger, but really at 23 when I stopped drinking, it was something that just kept me preoccupied and kept my mind off of a lot of the demons that I was battling and trying to work my way through my own head. So spring is right around the corner. I wake up, I hear some birds chirping. It is daylight savings time, so we're up a little bit earlier. But baseball season is also upon us. So find something in your life. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be something as simple as, hey, I get to listen to a Phillies game tonight. That gets you through these chaotic times. Understand that this is not permanent. This is just a season of our lives. It's not always going to be this chaotic. Sometimes it might be more chaotic, but we're going to all get through this. And if there's anything that you're struggling with, anything that you need, you can reach out to me, Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. Also, sign up for the newsletter, www.moderncraftsman.co. And that's it. So on to the meat and potatoes of this podcast, the approval process. So I was going back and forth to Nielsen, Chris, which if you guys don't follow him on Instagram, check him out. Really great guy. Super just well-versed in construction. Similar to what I do, just does a lot of everything, kind of a one-man show. I know he has a guy who works for him, but I'd say similar setup to mine, same type of work, same type of structure, hands-on, just very knowledgeable, very well-spoken, really great guy. I've got to meet a handful of times, but he was back and forth on Instagram, asking me a bunch of questions about purchasing the house, purchasing the property, excuse me, and what that process looked like for approval. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up as to what we did to get to where we are today, which just seemed like it's taken forever. Definitely could have been done faster, but again, there's just a lot of balls in the air, and trying to figure all of this out as we go with full-time job and podcasts and everything else has been challenging. So we were looking to move, and we were looking at initially just buying a house if we needed to renovate it, and it wound up at that point during the market post-COVID, everything was inflated. We were going to wind up spending $700,000 on a house and then having to put another couple $100,000 into it, and it just didn't make sense for me to invest $1 million in a house that I still wasn't happy with, and that I just felt like we were overpaying. Most of the houses that have been renovated, they were trying to pull that money and get that equity out of the house, but the renovations to me just weren't up to snuff. And so it's all of this work they put into it, I understand it, but if we bought it, we'd have to redo it. So I just wasn't willing to pay for a house that had been slightly renovated. And then the houses that really need work, people were coming in and buying them cash, which was another option, right? It's buy a dump, fix it up, pull the equity out of our house. But it just tough time to find a place. And then I was speaking with my dad. He's like, why don't you just build? And I really had never considered it. So we started running some numbers and figuring out, and then we started looking for land. And it just so happened that 2 lots down from us, our neighbor owned on his property. He owns, I think, 10 acres that his house is on. Then he owns a lot with 6 acres of ponds. And then he owned the lot that we purchased was for 6 acres. So he had just put it on market. I reached out to him. A couple of builders had reached out to him, and I was like, hey, listen, this is what's going on. We live right down the street. We have met him before. And I was like, I'm interested in buying this property. The hiccup was he didn't have any sort of approvals on the property at this point. So we're in Medford, and the Pinelands are in Medford. Luckily, we are on the other side of town, which it's not quite, we're not dealing with the Pinelands and the preservation, but we're still in an agriculturally zoned section of Medford. There's water table issues near us. There's a lot of woodlands. So there's still a lot of constraints to building where we are. So the lot was priced well, for all things considered, right? There are no approvals on it. So there was as we bought it, there were wetlands on the lot, and the way that they were delineated would deem the lot unbuildable, right? It was just a 6-acre parcel, but he had been told that it could be built on if you got the wetlands waivers done. So at that point, we had to get a contract in place to buy the property based on our findings. And if it wasn't buildable, we would just eat the deposit at that point. So yeah, there was a little bit of risk there. So the first thing that we did is we got hold of an engineer that we wanted to work with, and they put us in touch with a soil. He's an ecologist, honestly. So he's a soils engineer, but he's an ecologist. And he came out and he's done a bunch of this in the area. And he's like, yeah, he came and did a couple of soil samples just by hand. And he was like, just did a quick, we paid for this service as well. And we paid the engineer to do a little bit of due diligence on the lot. And we determined that like roughly where the wetlands were. And he was like, yeah, with this type of wetlands, what it is in this area right now, there's a 300-foot buffer in place, but you should be able to go get a wetlands waiver to get that down to 50 feet. So the lot 6 acres, the back 4 acres are wooded wetlands. The front 2 acres, there's, they border the wetlands, but with a 300-foot buffer on a 400 or 500-foot wide lot that's pretty deep, when you can only build on the front, like that makes that lot unbuildable. So at that point, he was like, yeah, I'm confident you'll be able to build on this lot, but like you're going to have to close on it prior to getting the results back because you have to get all this done through the DEP. They say it's 3 months, and then they drag their feet. He's like, it's going to be a year. And I didn't really believe him. But at that point, we were like, we had the information from the engineer. We had the information from the ecologist to be like, yeah, this is going to be buildable. You just have to go through this process as much as they can guarantee that. So we're still taking a risk, but we were fairly confident that it was going to be fine. It was also like there was other builders who were interested in the lot. And I know that there's a lot of builders who will buy stuff and kind of strong arm and leverage the seller, and just in case it's not buildable. But the fact that there were other builders who were interested in this, and the owner really wanted to sell to us because we already lived in the area and we wanted to build a house for our family here. He wanted to make sure he knew who his neighbors were going to be. So we ended up closing on the property, and we had to get a perk test done for the septic. So that was one of the first things. Well, first thing we did was we got a survey. So we get a survey of the entire lot. I lie. Sorry. First thing we did is we had the ecologist come back out, and he did a full delineation of the wetlands. So he went and took all of his soil samples. He did the delineation. He ribboned everything. They came out. They did a perk test for the septic, the 2 different, where it would perk in 2 different areas. And then all of that information was provided to the surveyor. The surveyor came up and put all that information on the survey. There was no survey of the property at this point. So they staked the corners. They delineated where the wetlands were. They marked where the proposed septic would be, all the grading, obviously. And at that point, we hired our engineer to submit everything to the DEP for a waiver for the wetlands. And again, that waiver is basically taken from a 300-foot buffer down to a 50-foot buffer. So now the area up front where the wetlands are towards the front of the lot, which will be towards the back of where we're building, basically to reduce that from a 300-foot buffer down to a 50-foot buffer. So we submitted all that information, the survey, the delineation from the ecologist, letters from the ecologist, all the information from the engineer. And then we sat tight and we waited. We got things going with the house design. We got a rough layout for the site from my buddy Tom. And then we just kind of kept waiting. We finally received word probably 9 months, 10 months in that they were going to approve everything. We had to wait until we actually got the letter in the mail. And then once we got the letter in the mail, I believe we had like 90 days to get our attorney to sign off on it and then submit it. I forget exactly where it went to, like not Board of Health. We had to send it to somebody at that point and have it noted on the deed as to what had been done. So we did that. we got everything back, and at that point it's like, okay, you now have the wetlands waiver in place, that you now have like a limit of disturbance that you can actually build on this property. And that process took around a year to get through, and there's just kind of nothing you can do about it. It's just waiting. So at that point, we continued to work on house design. Once we had a basic footprint for the house, we were able to provide that to my buddy Tom, who's doing the site layout for us. So he took our needs, took our plans, our barn. We kind of looked at the property. We looked at where there was some existing trees, where the septic would have to go, and we kind of designed the house and the plan, the layout based on what worked for the property, and created some screening and some separation from existing neighbors, and really highlighted the parts of the property that we were excited about, which is the backwoods, and just creating a little bit of privacy and creating this back pocket area that's somewhat screened by the shape of the house, and then screening some of the street with the shop. So we got that all done. I touched base with the septic company again, the engineer for the septic company, and ensured that what size our basically footprint would be based on the number of our bedrooms for our septic. So we did that, and then I went back and I met with the engineer again. And now that I had all this information, I was like, I need a grading plan from you. So he started on the grading plan based on the site layout from my buddy Tom, and then I got the septic design from the septic engineer. He provides that to the engineer, the civil engineer. He provides that to him, and then he's going to put a full grading plan on that with the septic design. With the water table, the way that our house is built, we're going to have a 2-stage system with the pump. The only other way to get gravity is to raise the grade up in there with a ton of soil, and that just really doesn't make sense to us. It's a lot more work, and to me, that's like part of the issue why we don't want to stay where we are. We just don't want to disturb the natural landscape that much and impact everyone around us, right? Like, we're going to bring all of this soil in, raise our house up, and then it's just going to shed off to everyone around us and behind us and next to us and to Hartford Road. And like, that just doesn't seem like the move. So there'll be a 2-stage with a pump out front. Once we get the engineering grading plan back, which should be this week, we will then send it back to the septic company. They will then take the grading report and all of the elevations and put them on the septic, so that at that point we can then file for our septic permit. I believe it's 2 years at that point for the septic permit. We have a 2-year window that we can get the work done. And then the plan for me is to get everything submitted for zoning, finalize the house plans. At that point, hopefully have zoning approved, be able to get the building permit approved, continue with site work, all that stuff, and then get construction started. So that's what that process looked like. There was obviously some risk there. There's obviously risk with buying the lot and not fully understanding the capacity of how to fund a renovate or a build. And in the back of my mind, I always told myself, like, if there's no approvals on this lot and it can be built, worst case scenario, I could always flip this with approvals. We'll probably have to put a certain amount of money into it to get there. But at that point, the lot's going to be worth way more than when we bought it. So it's like, if I were to go through all this and realize, hey, this isn't what we want to do, this doesn't make sense financially, we can't swing this, I always had this plan in place on the back end where it's like, I can still make money on this, going through this whole process and getting these waivers done, which are good for 10 years until you build. So I would create a bunch of equity in the property by doing that I could turn around and sell it. That's not what we ever wanted to do, but that got me over the mental hump of saying, like, hey, this is a big risk. This is a lot of money. So that's where we stand right now with the house build. I know some people have been asking me, seeing what I'm doing. That's where we stand. That's what we've gone through right now. This is the first time I'm going through all of this, especially with the wetlands and the DEP. And it was a hassle, and everyone knows it's a hassle, and there's just not too much you can do about there. So hopefully it's give you a little bit of insight as to what that process looked like for me and where we stand in the grand scheme of things. And hopefully it was just a little bit educational to you. That's it for this week. I appreciate everyone hanging around. As always, if you're interested in any sort of consulting, If you want to hop on a phone call, start figuring out what's going on with your business, what you can do to change your business, make your business better, reach out to me, Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. If you are a potential sponsor and you want to know what sponsoring the podcast looks like, or if you want to host a live podcast, or if you want to be a guest on the podcast specifically for your business, reach out to us. Hello at moderncraftsman.co. Please, 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 everyone join the newsletter. Nick and I are still working our way through that and trying to provide as much value, a little less hard sell on that, and really shift our focus a little bit. We appreciate your patience as we walk through this journey and learn this together with you. That's it for me this week. I will catch you guys next week, hopefully, when I have a little less on my plate.